My father got out the bread tin and the butter and the cheese and started making sandwiches. Let me tell you about this phony pheasant shooting business, he said. First of all, it's practiced only by the rich. Only the very rich can afford to rear pheasants just for the fun of shooting them down when they grow up. So to rear them meaning to raise them from when they're chicks. So in some parts of this country, wealthy people who own lots of land will raise animals like pheasants and other birds like grouse is another one. And then other wealthy people will travel to those to their fields and their land and pay a lot of money to shoot the pheasants or the grouse or whatever the game is. These wealthy idiots spend huge sums of money every year buying baby pheasants from pheasant farms and rearing them in pens until they're big enough to put out into the woods. In the woods, the young birds hang around like flocks of chickens. They're guarded by keepers and fed twice a day on the best corn until they're so fat they can hardly fly. And then beaters are hired who walk through the woods, clapping their hands and making as much noise as they can to drive the half-tame pheasants towards the half-baked men and their guns. After that, it's just bang, 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 and down they come. Would you like strawberry jam on one of those? Yes, please, I said. 1 jam and 1 cheese. But Dad... What? How do you actually catch the pheasants when you're poaching? Do you have a gun hidden away up there? A gun? He cried, disgusted. Real poachers don't shoot pheasants, Danny. Didn't you know that? You've only got to fire a cap pistol up in those woods and the keepers will be onto you. How do you do it? Ah, my father said. And the eyelids drooped over the eyes, veiled and secretive. He spread strawberry jam thickly on a piece of bread, taking his time. These things are big secrets, he said. Very big secrets indeed. But I reckon if my father could tell them to me, then maybe I can tell them to you. Would you like me to do that? Yes, I said. Tell me now. Chapter 5. The Secret Methods. All the best ways of poaching pheasants were discovered by my old dad, my father said. My old dad studied poaching the way a scientist studies a science. My father put my sandwiches on a plate and brought them over to my bunk. I put the plate on my lap and started eating. I was ravenous. Do you know, my old dad actually used to keep a flock of prime roosters in the backyard just to practice on, my father said. A rooster is very much like a pheasant, you see. They are equally stupid and they like the same sorts of food. A rooster is tamer, that's all. So, whenever my dad thought up a new method of catching pheasants, he tried it out on a rooster first to see if it worked. So what are the best ways? I asked. My father laid a half-eaten sandwich on the edge of the sink and gazed at me in silence for about 20 seconds. You promise you won't tell another soul? I promise. Now here's the thing, he said. Here's the first big secret. But it's more than a secret, Danny. It's the most important discovery in the whole history of poaching. He edged a shade closer to me. His face was pale in the pale yellow glow from the lamp in the ceiling, but his eyes were shining like stars. So here it is, he said. And now suddenly his voice became soft and whispery and very private. Pheasants, he whispered, are crazy about raisins. Is that the big secret? That's it, he said. It may not sound very much when I say it like that, but believe me, it is. Raisins, I said. Just ordinary raisins. It's like a mania with them. You throw a few raisins into a bunch of pheasants and they'll start fighting each other to get at them. My dad discovered that 40 years ago, just as he discovered these other things that I'm about to describe to you. My father paused and glanced over his shoulder as though to make sure there was nobody at the door of the caravan listening. Method number 1, he said softly, is known as the horsehair stopper. The horsehair stopper, I murmured. That's it, my father said. And the reason it's such a brilliant method is that it's completely silent. There's no squawking or flapping around or anything else with the horsehair stopper when the pheasant is caught. And that's mighty important because don't forget, Danny, when you're up in those woods at night and the great trees are spreading their branches high above you like black ghosts, it's so silent you can hear a mouse moving. And somewhere among it all, the keepers are waiting and listening. They're always there, those keepers, standing stony still against a tree or behind a bush with their guns at the ready. What happens with the horsehair stopper? I asked. How does it work? It's very simple, he said. First, you take a few raisins and you soak them in water overnight to make them plump and soft and juicy. Then you get a bit of good, stiff horsehair and you cut it up into 1/2-inch lengths. Horsehair, I said. Where'd you get horsehair? You put it out of a horse's tail, of course. That's not difficult as long as you stand to one side when you're doing it so you don't get kicked. Okay, go on, I said. So, you cut the horsehair up into 1/2-inch lengths. Then you push one of these lengths through the middle of a raisin so there's just a tiny bit of horsehair sticking out on each side. That's all you do. You are now ready to catch a pheasant. If you want to catch more than one, you prepare more raisins. Then when evening comes, you creep up into the woods, making sure you get there before the pheasants have gone up into the trees to roost. And then you scatter the raisins. And soon, along comes the pheasant and gobbles it up. What happens then? I asked. Well, here's what my dad discovered. First of all, the horsehair makes the raisin stick in the pheasant's throat. Doesn't hurt him, simply stays there and it tickles. It's rather like having a crumb stuck in your own throat. But after that, believe it or not, the pheasant never moves his feet again. He becomes absolutely rooted to the spot. And there he stands, pumping his silly neck up and down like a piston. And all you've got to do is nip out quickly from the place where you're hiding and pick him up. Is that really true, Dad? I swear it, my father said. Once a pheasant's had the horsehair stopper, you can turn a hose pipe on him and he won't move. It's just one of those unexplainable little things. But it takes a genius to discover it. My father paused and there was a gleam of pride in his eyes as he dwelt for a moment upon the memory of his own dad, the great poaching inventor. So that's method number 1, he said. So that's method number 1, he said. What's number 2? I asked. He said. Number 2's a real beauty. It's a flash of pure brilliance. I can even remember the day it was invented. I was just about the same age as you are now, and it was a Sunday morning, and my dad comes into the kitchen holding a huge white rooster in his hands. I think I've got it, he says. There's a little smile on his face and a shine of glory in his eyes, and he comes in very soft and quick and puts the bird down right in the middle of the kitchen table. By golly, he says, I've got a good one this time. A good what? Mum says, looking up from the sink. Horace, take that filthy bird off my table. There you can see Danny's grandfather with the bird, the rooster. The rooster has a funny little paper hat over its head like an ice cream cone upside down, and my dad is pointing to it proudly and saying, Stroke him. Go on, stroke him. Do anything you like to him. He won't move an inch. The rooster starts scratching away at the paper hat with one of its feet, but the hat seems to be stuck on and it won't come off. No bird in the world is going to run away once you cover up its eyes, my dad says, and he starts poking the rooster with his finger and pushing it around on the table. The rooster doesn't take the slightest bit of notice. You can have this one, he says to Mum. You can have it and wring its neck and dish it up for dinner as a celebration of what I've just invented. And then straight away, he takes me by the arm and marches me quickly out of the door, and off we go over the fields and up into the big forest the other side of Little Hampden, which used to belong to the Duke of Buckingham. And in less than 2 hours, we get 5 lovely fat pheasants with no more trouble than it takes to go out and buy them in a shop. My father paused for breath. His eyes were shining bright as they gazed back into the wonderful world of his youth. But Dad, I said, how do you get the paper hats over the pheasants' heads? You'd never guess it, Danny. Tell me. Listen carefully, he said, glancing again over his shoulder as though he expected to see a keeper or even the Duke of Buckingham himself at the caravan door. Here's how you do it. First of all, you dig a little hole in the ground, then you twist a piece of paper into the shape of a cone and you fit this into the hole, hollow end up like a cup. Then you smear the inside of the paper cup with glue and drop in a few raisins. And at the same time, you lay a trail of raisins along the ground leading up to it. Now, the old pheasant comes pecking along the trail, and when he gets to the hole, he pops his head inside to gobble up the raisins. Next thing he knows, he's got a paper hat stuck over his eyes. He can't see a thing. Isn't that a fantastic idea, Danny? My dad called it the sticky hat. I'm going to stop there. Okay. I shall see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.